Okay, imagine this. You wake up craving a delicious coffee you've been brewing lately, so you head over to the coffee bar, pick up the bag, and instantly know something is off. But of course, you're in denial, so you open it up anyway, weigh the beans, hoping for a miracle, but just moments later, your fears are confirmed. That last bean rolls out, hits the dosing cup, and your scales read a whopping 7.6 grams. And a profound thought crosses your mind. The do I do now? This is the Cafec Deep 27 pour over dripper, and I thought it sucked when I first got it. It also doesn't help that the name sounds like a porn movie. The brews were thin and under extracted, and more than anything, the extraction seemed uneven. But I have tested and reviewed enough products to know that when things are this bad, there's a high possibility that the problem is not with the brewer, but the brewee. Wait, would I be the brewery? Anyway, this was indeed the case, and I found two things that are key to getting great cups of coffee with this dripper. Don't worry, there's an entire segment in this video titled The Essential Guide where I cover this and a whole lot more. I then brew and compare two different recipes and also share my thoughts on how this stacks up against the mighty V60. So sit back and relax because I'd like to tell you why this little brewer, the Cafec Deep 27, has quickly become my favorite way to make pour over coffee. Okay, as shallow as this sounds, looks are important, and this is a pretty little thing, much like the rest of the aptly named flower dripper lineup. There's something deeply satisfying about the fluidity of the form and the internal rib pattern. Combine this with some beautiful color options and you have a product that's worthy of flaunting on your coffee bar. I particularly like the smoky one, and check out this match made in heaven. Now, unfortunately, at the time of making this review, you can only get the Deep 27 in plastic, unlike some of the other ones that come in porcelain. However, the clarity of the plastic used is surprisingly good. I don't know how this will hold up over time, but right now it almost has this crystal-like look and I love how it catches and refracts the light. Speaking of crystal, I think the entire series of drippers would look sick in glass, although preheating would be a pain. Now coming to build quality, as far as plastics go, this is top notch. Unlike the fellow Aiden, which we reviewed recently, linked up here, like I mentioned, the clarity is great, everything feels rounded and very satisfying to touch and handle. The walls are thick and rigid, and there are no sharp edges, obnoxious seam lines, or injection molding marks. No real complaints here. So now, on to the fun stuff. Let's brew some coffee, and I'll tell you why I'm so obsessed with this little brewer right now. Earlier in this video, I said I found two things that were key to getting good results: seating the paper filter and agitation. But why stop there? So I kept tinkering and found 5 more things to really set you up for success. Embracing the Indian parent mindset. Why settle for peak performance when you can push them a little further? Let me elucidate. Number 1, in my testing, I found it to be very important to seat the paper filter correctly. If you just drop it in and rinse it, it will not sit flush on all the walls. Initially, I thought they'd messed up the size and made the filters too small, but after a bit of trial and error, I realized that it needs to sit a lot deeper to fit right. Here's an easy hack. Once you've folded the spine or whatever this is called, place the filter in, then pinch the tip from below and gently pull down until you feel a bit of resistance. Then hold it in place with your other hand and wet it to set it. See how much lower that sits and how well it makes contact all the way around? Before I figured this out, I was getting very consistent results and uneven extractions because of how steep the walls are and how fast the flow is. Number 2, speaking of flow rate, this brewer is ridiculously fast, which means contact time is significantly lower than most other drippers. So it's quite easy to under extract if you don't introduce a lot of agitation. There are multiple ways to do this, but the two that I've had the most success with is stirring a lot or pouring a lot, i.e. introducing a lot of pulses. I tend to prefer the latter, and I'll tell you why once we get to the brewing. So yeah, these two things are super important, but like I just mentioned, there's more. 3 is dose. Right at the beginning of this video, I talked about a bag of coffee that had just 7.6 grams left. Well, the Deep 27 can brew bangers with even less coffee. Insane. Easily my favorite thing about this brewer. You can do anywhere from 6 to 20 grams of coffee. That's like Axl Rose's 5-octave vocal range. Now there's chatter on the forums about using 30 grams. Maybe that works for more developed roasts or dark roasts using the osmotic flow. But with the light roast that I'm brewing, I just haven't been able to extract them well. To be frank, if I'm brewing anything over say 12 grams of coffee, I find myself reaching for the V60. Number 4, coming back to filters, you may be tempted to fold and use your favorite V60 filters. In my case, that's the Cafec T90s. While it works in a pinch, I consistently prefer the cups that I got with the stock filters. My guess is that the uneven thickness and multiple layers messes with the flow dynamics. Number 5, getting the grind size right is pretty important. more so than other drippers, mainly because of how little time you have to intervene and agitate. With something like the V60, you can grind super coarse and still have a lot of time to agitate. Here, the water is gone like this, and just pulsing doesn't quite cut it. Grind too fine, and you're going to have more bypass than a 90-year-old heart patient because the bed is now offering too much resistance. You can pour slow and brew well extracted cups with very finely ground coffee, but the profile is too heavy and muddy for my palate. This next one is again really important, and that is to keep the slurry height low. Similar to my previous point regarding grinding too fine, having too much water above the bed seems to promote more bypass and has resulted in weak cups that lack sweetness and depth. Having too much water above the bed also means that the kettle stream is not agitating as much. And last, but certainly not least, is to only use center or very small circle pours because of how tiny of an area you have to pour onto. Pouring anywhere near the walls causes a ton of bypass, so pay a lot of attention to this. Oh, you can have so much fun with varying your pouring structure to get good extractions. We've done an entire video on pouring, which even won a Sprudgy Award, and I use these concepts a lot with the Deep 27 to tailor the brews to my palate. Definitely check out that video if you haven't already. It's our best performing video to date. Alright, so keeping all of these things in mind, let's make some coffee. I'll first brew the recipe with a lot of stirring, and then I'll do the one with many pulses. For both recipes, I'll be brewing 10 grams of washed Colombian from Prodigal with 170 grams of water. These recipes are scalable down to a tiny 6-gram dose, and I'll tell you how to do that once we've brewed some coffee. And now, by the power of editing, let's brew. We have 10 grams of this, oof, that smells so good, delicious coffee ground up. I used the Matza Philos with the 200D burrs. That's a super sweet burr set, so it enhances sweetness even more. I found the two to be a great combo. Give that a quick shake. Starting with a high center pour and then quickly getting the rest of the bed wet. Right at 30 grams. And I'm going to let that sit for a minute, which means we have plenty of time for you to go and subscribe and hit that like button. Come on. And if you really enjoy what we do, then we're on Patreon. You can show us some love there. Okay, so once we hit 1 minute, I'm going to split the rest of the water into 3 pours of 46 grams each. I don't know what the exact value is, but at the end of it, I'll hit around 170 for our total 1:17 ratio. Okay, here we are. This is going to be fun. Quickly pour in 50 grams of water. And as that's drawing down, I am just going to stir. You can go pretty crazy with this, like I said. And just as that finishes, I'm going to do the next pour. There you go. There. Another 45 or 50 grams. And again, stir pretty aggressively. This may look ridiculous, but it's just such a fast brewer that it's almost impossible to stall this thing. And as you can see, this pour is drawing down a little slower than the previous one. And then I'm going to quickly go in for the last pour. And 170. Perfect. And this last one, I'm going to give it a bit of a gentle gentle stir. And then a few seconds before the drawdown, I will just give it a little bit of a shake, a wiggle, and then wait. We're at around 2 minutes, 30 seconds, right on time. And this should get done right now. 2 minutes, 37 seconds. We're right in the ballpark. So yeah, that's about it. All right, a quick taste, but I'm not going to tell you anything until I do the pulsed brew, and then we can compare the two. Crazy amount of agitation, and still you get this kind of a cup. Here, you can tailor the brew based on how often and how aggressively you stir. For the highest extraction and most bodies, stir after every pour. To lower extraction, reduce the number of stirs or the duration of stirs and how aggressively you're stirring. Play around with this and get it to exactly where you like it. Okay, on to the pulsed recipe. I'll try to walk you through what I'm doing. Give that a quick shake to settle it. I start again with a 1 minute bloom using 3x the dose of water, so 30 grams, and that's about it. The entire bed is wet. We'll let that sit for a minute. And just at the 1 minute mark, I'm going to start pulsing. Pour until the water is a few centimeters above the bed and stop. I'll let that drain down. Just as you see the bed running dry, start the next pour. And two, three, couple of center pours to do some deeper agitation. Six, I'm at 128 grams now, and the steam is definitely going to up my mic. Oh, the things I do for YouTube to finish this out. So I think that would be around 8 or 9 pours. I lost count. There we are. And I'm going to let that draw down. We're currently at 2 minutes and 24 seconds. So right around that 2 minutes 30 to 3 minute frame. Time is a great indication of if you've got the grind size right. So yeah, that's it. Since we're going by visual cues, you can follow the exact same rule for a smaller dose and you'll automatically be brewing with less water. And this makes the recipe very easily scalable. The only thing you may need to tweak is grind size. Now, let's talk about the pours themselves, and here's where the real fun is because you get to tailor the brew to your palate. Raise the kettle to increase agitation and lower it to decrease agitation. Because this thing is so narrow, the bed of coffee is very tall, so holding a dead center pour can help bump up the extraction by penetrating deep and agitating. Use a combo of this and small circles to balance the brew to your palate. I generally find myself doing at least 2 aggressive center pours. Okay, let's try both and I'll tell you what I'm tasting. Here we have the stirred brew, and this is the pulsed one. I'm gonna try this first. Super nice. Intense honey-like sweetness, big body, and I'm getting what tastes like red fruit and milk chocolate, but I can't quite describe it in any more detail. It's a little muddy, and I've generally found this to be the case with heavily stirred brews, and my theory is that the aggressive agitation pushes more microfines through the filter and into the cup. Still very enjoyable and may even be to your preference. Okay, let me try this. Oof, there's that clarity I was missing in the previous cup, and the body is still very much there. Kind of reminds me of the Aiden brews. Clear malic acidity, vibrant, tastes like crisp apple, and then that leads into some darker stone fruit, and the same honey sweetness is present through the entire experience and just lingers on into the finish. Even though I sound like a pretentious dick, hopefully that helps you understand the difference between the two cups. Now, over and above what it delivers in the cup, I tend to prefer the pulsed recipe because I find it to be more easily repeatable and it's also a lot more chill. Having to pour aggressively and then stir quickly before the water draws down is not relaxing, and I certainly don't need any more stress in my life. I still highly recommend you try both and see which one you prefer, or even combine the two and see what happens. Now, compared to the GOAT, the V60, there are some key differences. In the cup, V60 brews are higher clarity and more nuanced with a little less texture. And once I get to a dose of around 15 grams or more, I tend to prefer the V60. Cool. Now, before we look at price and who this brewer is for, there are a few things that annoy me about it. Number one, seating the filter is a faff, and getting that wrong can really mess with consistency. Two, coffee residue builds up in nooks and crannies over time and can be quite a pain to clean, especially in these deep grooves. It's not easily visible like on this white V60, but trust me, it's there and it can mess with your cup. If you use it regularly, I recommend the occasional soak in hot water and kafiza and you should be good. Number three, it only comes in plastic. And while the thermal benefits are undeniable, it's just a deal breaker for a lot of people. Cafec, please make a glass version. Number four, at the time of filming this video, there is only one type of filter currently available for this dripper, and it's made by Cafec. This is problematic for a couple of reasons. Firstly, you don't have any cheaper alternatives, and if your local stockist runs out, you're screwed. And secondly, if you're a little nerdy like me, you have no option to experiment with different flow dynamics if you want to try a different style of brew. This should hopefully change once it gains more popularity. Number five, while it can do doses up to 20 grams and maybe even more, I think its strength lies in those really small doses of 6 to 12 grams. If you only brew 15 grams or more, then there are many other drippers that would probably be a better fit. So yeah, that's about it. Nothing major in my opinion, so let's move on to price. At 19 US dollars, I think it's pretty reasonably priced considering what it delivers in the cup and the quality of the plastic used. I would happily recommend this to anyone who's into filter coffee and looking for something a little different in the cup. Even if you own a bunch of drippers, this is different enough to add to your arsenal, and with the crazy number of brewers that are on the market today, I don't get to say this very often. The Deep 27 is also great for people like me who love to brew different coffees through the day and are also quite sensitive to caffeine. You can also enjoy a really fancy coffee over a much longer time. Like I said with the Aiden, the Deep 27 lets me microdose all day, and here I have the added pleasure of brewing the coffee myself. It's why we don't post as often on YouTube because I'm too busy brewing 8 cups a day. Jokes aside, I absolutely love what this little brewer delivers in the cup with these ridiculously tiny doses. And if you don't mind brewing with plastic, then I can't think of a reason why you shouldn't pick one up. Alright, I'm done. Thank you so much for watching and brew ARAMSE.